I never imagined my life would unravel the way it did. If someone had told me a year ago that a security camera, a small piece of technology one installed without much thought, would upend everything I thought I knew about my marriage, I would have laughed it off. But here I am, sitting in the wreckage of what was once a happy life, piecing together how it all fell apart. My name is Nathan. I'm 37, an accountant who's built a career out of stability and predictability. Numbers are my world, they make sense, they follow rules. Unfortunately, people don't, and I've learned that the hard way. For the past 11 years, I was married to Laura. She's 35, a part-time interior decorator with an eye for color and a knack for creating spaces that feel like home. When we first got together, her creativity and spontaneity balanced my practical, measured approach to life. We complemented each other in a way that made our relationship feel effortless, at least at the beginning. We live in a quiet suburban neighborhood in a house that Laura lovingly decorated. It's the kind of place that looks idyllic from the outside, a well-kept lawn, warm lights glowing in the windows, and 2 cars parked in the driveway. But behind the facade, things had grown, stagnant. Routine has a way of creeping into even the best marriages. Our lives became predictable, almost mechanical. I'd go to work, come home, and settle into the same evening routine of dinner, television, and early nights. Laura, for her part, kept busy with her decorating projects and part-time work, but I could tell she wasn't entirely happy. She started talking about wanting something new. At first, it was just casual mentions, comments about trying new experiences or breaking out of her comfort zone. Then, one day, she announced she was enrolling in a dance class. "I've always wanted to try it," she said with a smile, her eyes lighting up in a way I hadn't seen in months. I was happy for her. If dance made her happy, who was I to object? She seemed genuinely excited, and for the first few weeks, I noticed a change in her mood. She was more upbeat, more energetic, and I told myself this hobby was a good thing for her, and for us. What I didn't realize then was that this seemingly innocent hobby would be the beginning of the end. It started subtly, almost imperceptibly. Laura began spending more time talking about her dance instructor, a man named Derek. At first, it was casual comments about how talented he was or how much she was learning. But over time, his name came up more and more. "He's such a great teacher," she'd say. "He really knows how to bring out the best in people." I didn't think much of it at first. After all, it's natural to talk about someone who's helping you with something you're passionate about. But then other changes started to creep in. Laura began dressing differently for her classes. Her outfits were more carefully chosen, her makeup a little more polished. She'd leave the house with an energy I hadn't seen in a long time and come back distracted, as if part of her mind was still somewhere else. When I jokingly suggested tagging along to one of her classes, her reaction caught me off guard. "Oh, you wouldn't like it," she said quickly, waving the idea away. "It's not really your thing." I let it go, but the way she deflected left me with a nagging sense of unease. Looking back, I wonder if I should have trusted my instincts then, if I should have paid closer attention to the subtle shifts in her behavior. But I didn't. I told myself I was imagining things, that everything was fine. It wasn't. What started as a harmless hobby, a way for Laura to inject some excitement into her routine, would soon become the catalyst for a betrayal I never saw coming. At first, I tried to be supportive. Laura was excited about dance in a way I hadn't seen her excited about anything in years. She came home talking about choreography, music, and how the class had pushed her out of her comfort zone. It seemed to be giving her a sense of purpose, and I didn't want to take that away from her. But the changes in her routine became harder to ignore. The classes, which started as a once-a-week commitment, quickly turned into 2, then 3 nights a week. She claimed it was because she wanted to get better, but the time she spent at the studio seemed excessive. She'd leave in the late afternoon and come back long after the class should have ended, brushing off my questions with vague explanations about staying late to practice or helping clean up. Then there were the outfits. Laura's wardrobe for her classes had transformed. What began as simple leggings and t-shirts were replaced by sleek, fitted athletic wear that seemed more about making an impression than comfort. She started taking extra care with her hair and makeup before leaving for class, something she hadn't done in years for date nights with me. I told myself it was harmless. After all, people want to look their best when they're passionate about something, right? But a small voice in the back of my mind kept whispering that something didn't add up. Her phone habits changed too. Laura had never been secretive about her phone before. We'd often swap devices to look something up or show each other funny videos. But now, her phone seemed glued to her side. She'd turn it face down on the table, and I noticed she always seemed to have it on silent. One evening, as we were sitting on the couch, her phone buzzed. She picked it up quickly, glancing at the screen and smiling faintly before typing out a response. "Who's that?" I asked casually. "Oh, just one of the girls from class," she said, not looking up. Her answer felt rehearsed, like she'd been prepared for the question. I didn't press further, but the unease in my chest grew stronger. The final straw came when I suggested coming to one of her dance showcases. I thought it would be a nice way to support her, to show I was invested in her new passion. Her reaction was immediate, and unexpected. "Eric, you don't need to do that," she said, laughing nervously. "It's really just for the students and their families. Besides, I'd feel weird with you watching me dance." "We've been married for 11 years, I said, confused. "Why would that feel weird?" She hesitated, her eyes flickering away. "I don't know. It's just, different. It's my thing, you know." Her deflection only added fuel to my growing suspicions. What was she hiding? That night, as I lay in bed next to her, my mind raced with questions I couldn't answer. Was it just me being paranoid, or was there something more to her new hobby? I decided to brush it off, telling myself I was overthinking. But deep down, I couldn't ignore the nagging feeling that something wasn't right. Little did I know, the truth was far worse than anything I could have imagined. In the days that followed, Laura's behavior became even harder to ignore. She was increasingly absorbed in her phone, often retreating to another room to take calls or respond to messages. When I asked who she was talking to, she would wave me off with a nonchalant, "Just someone from the studio." Her time away from home also started to stretch beyond the dance studio hours she'd initially described. On several occasions, she claimed to be running errands after class or grabbing a late bite with some of the other students. I wanted to believe her, but her explanations felt thin, like she was only giving me enough to keep me from asking more questions. One evening, while she was in the shower, her phone buzzed on the counter. I glanced at the screen out of habit, not expecting anything unusual. But the name on the notification made my stomach twist, Derek. The message read, "Can't wait for tomorrow, our time is always the best part of my week." I stared at the screen, my mind racing. Derek was her instructor, the man she constantly talked about, the one she seemed to admire so much. But this message didn't sound like something you'd send to a student. My gut told me to confront her then and there, but I hesitated. What if I was reading too much into it? What if it was harmless? I decided to wait and see if there was more. The opportunity came sooner than I expected. The next night, Laura left for her usual class, but something about her demeanor felt off. She seemed unusually cheerful, almost giddy, as she kissed me goodbye and rushed out the door. I decided to check the security cameras. I'd installed them a year ago, mostly as a precaution after a neighbor's house had been broken into. They weren't meant for snooping, just basic coverage of the front yard, driveway, and entryway. But tonight, I found myself pulling up the live feed, watching as Laura's car pulled out of the driveway and disappeared down the street. I switched to the saved footage from previous nights, scrolling through clips from the times she said she'd been at class. Most of it seemed normal, but one clip from a week ago caught my attention. It was around 10:30 p.m., well past the time her class usually ended. Laura's car pulled into the driveway, but she didn't get out right away. Instead, a second car parked behind her, and a man got out. Derek. They stood by her car, talking and laughing softly. At one point, he leaned in close, and though the camera angle didn't give me a clear view, it was obvious that they were more than just friends. My chest tightened as I watched the footage. My suspicions weren't just paranoia. There was something going on between Laura and Derek, and it wasn't innocent. That night, I barely slept. I kept replaying the clip in my mind, wondering how long this had been happening and how I could have missed the signs. I thought about confronting her again, but a part of me wanted more proof, something undeniable that she couldn't explain away. The next day, I started digging deeper. I checked her social media, scrolling through her posts and comments for any clues. Most of it seemed harmless, but then I noticed a pattern: likes and comments from Derek on nearly every post she'd made in the past few months. One comment, in particular, stood out. It was on a photo she'd posted of herself after a class, her hair tied back and her cheeks flushed. Derek had written, "Looking amazing, as always. You're my star." It was innocuous enough to avoid suspicion at first glance, but in the context of everything else, it felt damning. I felt like my world was beginning to unravel. The woman I thought I knew, the life we'd built together, was slipping through my fingers, and I didn't know how to stop it. I couldn't ignore the evidence anymore. Between the messages on her phone, the suspicious behavior, and the late-night interaction with Derek caught on camera, it was clear that something was deeply wrong. But I needed undeniable proof, something she couldn't twist or explain away. The next day, I waited for Laura to leave for her class. Once she was gone, I went to the cabinet where we kept the security camera system. I adjusted the settings, activating a camera in the living room that wasn't part of our usual coverage. It had been stored away since I installed it, but I decided to place it strategically in the room to capture any unusual activity. I told myself it wasn't spying, it was about getting clarity. I couldn't keep living with the doubt, the second-guessing, the gnawing sense that I was being deceived. That night, Laura came home later than usual. I was sitting on the couch, pretending to watch TV, but my focus was entirely on her. She looked flushed, almost glowing, as she dropped her bag by the door and headed upstairs without a word. When she was out of sight, I grabbed her bag and opened it. Inside, I found a small gift box tied with a ribbon. My hands trembled as I opened it, revealing an expensive bracelet with an engraving, "To my muse, Derek." The air left my lungs. This wasn't just a fling or a passing infatuation, Derek had given her something personal, intimate. I put the bracelet back in the box and returned it to her bag, my heart pounding. The next day, while she was at class, I checked the footage from the newly activated camera in the living room. What I saw made my stomach turn. 2 nights earlier, after she claimed to be staying late to practice, Derek had been in our house. The footage showed them sitting on the couch, laughing and talking closely. At one point, he reached out to touch her face, and she didn't pull away. Instead, she leaned into him, and they kissed, deeply, passionately, as if they were in a world of their own. The betrayal wasn't just emotional, it was physical. I couldn't watch anymore. I closed the laptop, my hands shaking, my chest tight with anger and heartbreak. The life I thought I knew, the wife I thought I loved, had been lying to me for months. When Laura came home that evening, I couldn't even look at her. She tried to make small talk, asking about my day, but her voice grated on me. How could she stand there, pretending everything was fine, when I'd seen the truth with my own eyes? I spent the night lying awake, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing. Every happy memory we'd shared felt tainted now, every moment of trust and vulnerability turned into a cruel joke. By morning, I knew what I had to do. The confrontation was inevitable, and I was no longer interested in giving her the benefit of the doubt. She was going to face the truth, and I wasn't going to let her lie her way out of it. The next evening, after another one of Laura's so-called classes, I sat in the living room, waiting for her to come home. My heart pounded in my chest as I rehearsed what I was going to say. The proof was undeniable now, and there was no way she could deflect or explain it away. When she walked through the door, she greeted me with the same casual smile she'd been giving me for weeks. It was infuriating to see her act as if everything was normal when I knew the truth. "Hey," she said, setting her bag down. "How was your day?" "Sit down," I said, my voice flat. Her smile faltered, and she gave me a wary look. "What's going on?" I gestured to the couch. "Sit." She hesitated but finally did as I asked, her expression a mix of confusion and apprehension. "I know about Derek," I said, keeping my voice as steady as I could. Her eyes widened, and for a moment, she didn't say anything. The silence was deafening. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said finally, but her voice lacked conviction. "Don't lie to me, Laura," I said, leaning forward. "I've seen the messages. I've seen the bracelet. And I've seen the footage." Her face turned pale, and she opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. "I know he's been here," I continued, my voice rising. "I know about the nights you've spent with him, the time you've stolen from me while pretending you were at your stupid dance classes. I trusted you, Laura, and you betrayed me." Tears welled up in her eyes, but I didn't feel sympathy, not yet. "Nathan, she started, but I cut her off. "Don't you dare try to deny it," I snapped. "I've seen it with my own eyes. The cameras don't lie." Her tears spilled over then, and she buried her face in her hands. "I didn't mean for this to happen," she said, her voice muffled. It just happened." I laughed bitterly. "It just happened. That's your excuse. You don't accidentally kiss someone, Laura. You don't accidentally bring them into our home. You made choices, deliberate choices, and you lied to me every step of the way." She looked up at me, her face streaked with tears. "I was unhappy," she said quietly. "I felt stuck. We've been living the same routine for years, and I needed something different." Her words felt like a slap in the face. "So instead of talking to me, instead of trying to fix things, you decided to cheat?" "I didn't plan it," she said, her voice trembling. "Derek made me feel alive again. He made me feel like I mattered. And I didn't?" I asked, my voice breaking. She didn't answer, and the silence spoke volumes. I stood up, unable to sit there any longer. "You know what, Laura? I don't care why you did it. You could have come to me, but instead, you chose to destroy everything we've built together. I hope he was worth it." She reached for my hand, but I pulled away. "Nathan, please," she said, her voice desperate. "I'll end it. I'll cut him out of my life. Just give me a chance to fix this." I stared at her, my heart heavy with anger and sadness. "You don't fix something like this, Laura. You can't undo what you've done." I turned and walked out of the room, leaving her sobbing on the couch. I didn't know what my next step was, but one thing was clear, the life I thought I had was gone, and there was no going back. The days after the confrontation were some of the longest and loneliest of my life. I moved into the guest room that night, unable to stomach the thought of sharing the same bed with Laura. The house, once a place of comfort and routine, now felt cold and alien, its silence broken only by the occasional sound of Laura crying in the next room. She tried to talk to me a few times, pleading for forgiveness, but I wasn't ready. Her words felt hollow, and every time I looked at her, all I could see was Derek. The image of them together on the couch, the intimacy they shared, was seared into my mind. At work, I struggled to focus. Numbers, which had always been my refuge, felt meaningless. My co-workers noticed my distraction, but I brushed off their concern with half-hearted excuses about being tired. The truth was, I was exhausted, mentally, emotionally, and physically. Laura claimed she had ended things with Derek. She deleted his messages, stopped attending her dance classes, and even handed me her phone as a gesture of transparency. "You can check it any time you want," she said, her voice trembling. But I couldn't bring myself to trust her. Not yet. Maybe not ever. One night, while I was sitting alone in the guest room, I opened the security camera footage again. I don't know what I was hoping to find, closure, perhaps, or some confirmation that she truly had cut ties with him. Instead, I found myself replaying the same clips, reliving the betrayal over and over again. The pain was almost unbearable. How had it come to this? How had the woman I loved, the woman I'd spent 11 years building a life with, chosen someone else over me? I began questioning everything about our marriage. Had I been too distant? Too focused on work? Had I missed signs of her unhappiness, signs that things were falling apart? Late one evening, Laura knocked softly on the guest room door. I didn't respond, but she came in anyway, sitting on the edge of the bed. "Nathan," she said quietly, "I know I've hurt you. I know I've destroyed your trust, and I don't know if I can ever earn it back. But I need you to know that I regret everything. I regret betraying you. I regret hurting us." Her voice cracked, and she wiped away a tear. "I'm willing to do whatever it takes to make this right. Counseling, therapy, whatever you need. I'll do it." Her words hung in the air, heavy with desperation. Part of me wanted to believe her, to grab onto the hope that maybe we could fix what was broken. But another part of me, the part that had watched her kiss Derek in our living room, couldn't forget. "I don't know if I can forgive you," I said finally, my voice barely above a whisper. She nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I understand," she said. "But I'm not giving up on us." She left the room, and I sat there in the dark, grappling with the weight of her words. I didn't know what the future held, but one thing was certain: the road ahead would be long, painful, and uncertain. The days following Laura's promise to do whatever it takes to fix our marriage were tense and emotionally draining. True to her word, she scheduled a counseling session, and I reluctantly agreed to attend. Not because I believed it would work, but because I felt like I owed it to the years we'd spent together to at least try. Our first session was awkward. We sat in a small, softly lit office across from a therapist named Dr. Harris, who radiated calm professionalism. Laura spoke first, admitting to her affair with Derek and explaining, once again, how she felt unfulfilled and distant in our marriage. "I'm not excusing what I did," she said, her voice trembling. "I just want you to understand why it happened." Her words felt like daggers. Even though I'd heard similar justifications before, they stung just as much now. She wasn't making excuses, she claimed, but every word sounded like one. When it was my turn to speak, I struggled to find the right words. "I don't understand how you could do this," I said finally. "If you were unhappy, why didn't you talk to me? Why didn't you try to fix things instead of turning to him?" Laura looked down at her hands, unable to meet my gaze. "I was scared," she said. "Scared you wouldn't listen. Scared it wouldn't matter." Her response only deepened the ache in my chest. Had I really been so distant, so inattentive, that she felt the only solution was to betray me? Dr. Harris guided us through the session, asking questions meant to encourage open communication. But every answer from Laura felt like a reminder of how far apart we'd grown, and every question directed at me felt like an accusation. When we left the office, I felt more drained than hopeful. At home, Laura continued her efforts to prove she was committed to rebuilding our marriage. She stopped attending dance classes, deleted Derek's contact information, and even shared her phone password with me. She cooked dinner every night, trying to recreate the meals we used to enjoy together, and made a point of asking about my day. But no matter how hard she tried, it never felt like enough. I found myself constantly questioning her motives. Was she doing this because she truly wanted to repair our relationship, or was it out of guilt and fear of losing the life we'd built? I began to see her every action through the lens of doubt, and that doubt consumed me. One evening, as we sat at the dinner table, I asked her point blank, "Have you talked to him? At all?" Her eyes widened, and she shook her head vehemently. "No. I swear, Nathan. I haven't spoken to him since I ended it." I wanted to believe her, but the trust we'd once shared was gone. Every word she said felt like a potential lie, every smile like a mask. I started checking her phone when she wasn't looking, scrolling through her messages and call logs for any sign of Derek. I found nothing, but instead of reassuring me, it only made me feel more paranoid. What if she had another way of contacting him? What if she was hiding something even deeper? The constant suspicion was exhausting. It seeped into every corner of my life, making it impossible to focus on work, friends, or even myself. I was trapped in a cycle of doubt and bitterness, unable to move forward but unwilling to let go. Despite Laura's efforts, the gap between us only seemed to widen. The harder she tried to prove her loyalty, the more distant I became. Every reminder of her affair, every lingering thought of Derek, was a barrier I couldn't overcome. I began to wonder if trying to reconcile was a mistake, if some wounds were simply too deep to heal. The growing rift between us was impossible to ignore. Laura kept trying, pouring her energy into fixing things, but her efforts felt hollow to me. No matter what she did, the images of her with Derek, laughing, touching, kissing, played on a loop in my mind. Trust, once shattered, doesn't come back easily, if at all. Still, I convinced myself to give it time. Maybe, I thought, if I saw her dedication to changing, I could find a way to forgive her. Maybe the love we once shared could outweigh the pain of her betrayal. But that faint hope was crushed when I stumbled upon the truth I had been dreading. It was a Sunday afternoon. Laura was in the backyard gardening, a hobby she'd picked up in her effort to appear grounded and domestic again. I was in the kitchen when her phone buzzed on the counter. I glanced at the screen. It wasn't a name, just a number, but the preview of the message froze me in place. "I miss you. Can we talk soon?" The walls seemed to close in around me. My hands trembled as I picked up the phone, unlocking it with the code she'd freely shared. I scrolled through her messages, my worst fears coming to life in front of me. It wasn't just one text. There were weeks of messages between her and Derek, all written in careful language that tried to downplay the intensity of their connection but failed miserably. "I can't stop thinking about you. I'll call when I can. He's still watching me closely, so I have to be careful." Every word felt like a punch to the gut. I scrolled further, finding a message from just 2 days ago where she'd agreed to meet him at a coffee shop near the dance studio. It was over. Any hope I had of rebuilding our marriage was gone. I put the phone down, my chest heaving as anger and betrayal washed over me. The woman who had cried in therapy, who had begged for another chance, who had sworn she was done with Derek, she had lied. Again. When Laura came back inside, wiping her hands on a towel and smiling at me, I couldn't hold it in. "Still talking to him, huh?" I said, my voice cold and cutting. Her smile faltered, confusion crossing her face. "What are you talking about?" I held up her phone. "This." Her eyes widened, and she took a step back, her face draining of color. "Nathan, I can explain." "Don't," I snapped, cutting her off. "Don't even try to explain. I've read the messages, Laura. I know you've been lying to me this entire time." She opened her mouth to speak but seemed to think better of it. Instead, she sank into a chair, her head in her hands. "I wanted to end it," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "I tried, but I couldn't. He means something to me." The words hit me like a physical blow. "He means something to you?" I repeated, my voice rising. "And what about me, Laura? What about the 11 years we've spent building a life together? Do I mean anything to you?" Tears streamed down her face, but I didn't feel the slightest bit of sympathy. She had made her choice, and it wasn't me. "I can't do this anymore," I said, my voice trembling with rage and heartbreak. "You've destroyed us, Laura. Whatever we had, whatever we could have had, it's gone." She reached for me, but I stepped back, shaking my head. "Don't," I said. "Don't touch me. Don't say anything. Just leave me alone." I walked out of the house, slamming the door behind me. I didn't know where I was going or what I was going to do, but I knew one thing: this was the end. There was no coming back from this. The woman I thought I knew, the life I thought I had, were gone forever. The days after discovering Laura's second betrayal felt like I was living in a haze. The house, once a place of comfort and familiarity, had become a prison of memories and pain. Every room reminded me of the life we'd built together and the lies that had torn it apart. I contacted a lawyer the morning after confronting her. Filing for divorce felt like both a relief and a surrender, a way to reclaim some semblance of control over my life while acknowledging that everything I'd fought to save was beyond repair. When I told Laura about my decision, she didn't argue. She didn't cry or plead like she had before. Instead, she simply nodded, as though she had already resigned herself to this outcome. "I guess I deserve this," she said quietly. Her words felt hollow, as if they were meant to absolve her of guilt rather than acknowledge the depth of the damage she'd done. I moved into a small apartment a few weeks later, leaving the house to her temporarily while we worked out the details of the divorce. Packing up my things was excruciating. Each item I put into a box felt like a piece of my old life being dismantled. I came across photos from our vacations, anniversary cards we'd exchanged, and mementos from a time when I thought we were happy. I threw most of it away. Sharing the truth with family and friends was another ordeal. My parents were devastated, my mother crying on the phone as I explained what had happened. My friends tried to be supportive, offering to take me out or keep me company, but their sympathy only made me feel more humiliated. "You're better off without her," one of them said over drinks one night. Maybe they were right, but it didn't feel that way. All I felt was loss, a gnawing emptiness that followed me everywhere. Meanwhile, Laura's life seemed to be unraveling as well. Word of the affair had spread among our social circle, and the whispers weren't kind. Mutual friends began to distance themselves from her, and she lost a few interior decorating clients after the rumors reached them. I heard through the grapevine that Derek had also moved on. Whether he'd grown tired of the drama or never saw her as more than a fling, I didn't know. But the thought of her being left alone after destroying our marriage gave me a fleeting sense of vindication. Still, it was cold comfort. Her suffering didn't erase mine. At work, I threw myself into my job, using the familiarity of numbers and spreadsheets to distract myself from the chaos of my personal life. But even there, the memories crept in. I'd find myself staring at my computer screen, reliving every argument, every lie, every moment I should have seen the truth but didn't. Nights were the worst. Alone in my small apartment, the silence was deafening. I'd sit on the couch, scrolling aimlessly through my phone or staring at the ceiling, wondering how everything had fallen apart so quickly. The divorce process dragged on, each meeting with lawyers and mediators feeling like another wound being reopened. Splitting our assets was painful, not because I cared about the material things, but because it was a reminder of how intertwined our lives had been. Every document I signed felt like another nail in the coffin of the life I'd once believed in. By the time the divorce was finalized, I felt like a shell of the person I used to be. The betrayal had left me broken in ways I didn't know how to fix, and the future seemed like a long, dark road I wasn't sure I wanted to travel. I told myself I'd get through it eventually, that time would heal the wounds. But in those moments, all I could see was the wreckage. And I had no idea how to move forward. After the divorce was finalized, I thought I'd feel some sense of closure, like a weight had been lifted. Instead, it felt like I was standing in the ruins of my life, unsure of what to do next. The paperwork was signed, the marriage officially over, but the scars of betrayal and loss lingered, refusing to fade. Living alone in the small apartment was harder than I'd anticipated. The silence was oppressive, amplifying every thought, every memory. I tried to fill the space with distractions, TV shows, podcasts, anything to drown out the endless loop of questions in my mind. What had I done wrong? Was there something I could have done to stop it? The few friends who stuck by me tried to pull me out of my isolation, but their efforts felt futile. I went out with them occasionally, nursing a drink in a crowded bar or pretending to laugh at their jokes, but it all felt hollow. Being around happy couples or groups of friends only reminded me of what I'd lost. Work became my only anchor. I threw myself into my job, taking on extra projects and staying late at the office. Numbers were predictable, reliable. They didn't lie or change the rules halfway through. But even there, I couldn't escape the lingering effects of the divorce. My productivity suffered, and my boss pulled me aside one day to ask if I was okay. "I'm fine," I lied, forcing a weak smile. But I wasn't fine. Not even close. I tried to rebuild in small ways. I started running in the mornings, hoping the physical activity would clear my head. I signed up for a woodworking class, thinking a new hobby might give me something to focus on. But nothing stuck. Every attempt to move forward felt forced, like I was pretending to be someone I wasn't. Meanwhile, Laura's life continued to fall apart. Mutual friends occasionally updated me, though I never asked. She'd lost several more clients and moved out of the house after struggling to afford the mortgage on her own. I heard she was living in a small rental and keeping to herself, her once vibrant social life reduced to a handful of acquaintances who hadn't cut ties. Part of me felt vindicated, but another part of me felt nothing. Her struggles didn't bring me any satisfaction. If anything, they reminded me of the emptiness we'd both been left with. One evening, I found myself scrolling through old photos on my phone. Pictures of vacations, birthdays, and holidays stared back at me, a montage of what I thought had been a happy life. I stopped on a photo of us from our 5th anniversary, a weekend trip to the mountains where we'd laughed, hiked, and shared quiet moments by the fire. Looking at it now, I wondered if it had all been a lie. Had she been unhappy even then, or was it something that developed later, slowly eroding what we had until there was nothing left? I deleted the photo. By the end of the night, I'd deleted nearly all the pictures of us together. It felt like shedding a layer of skin, painful but necessary. I wished I could do the same with the memories. The worst part was knowing that I'd never fully escape them. No matter how much time passed, no matter how much I tried to move on, the betrayal would always be a part of me. A reminder of how easily trust could be broken, of how fragile love really was. For the first time in my life, I began to question whether I even wanted to try again. Was it worth the risk? Could I ever truly open myself up to someone else, knowing how badly it could end? I didn't have the answers. All I knew was that the life I'd spent years building was gone, and I had no idea how to start over. Weeks turned into months, but the hollow feeling inside me remained. The divorce was over, yet its weight lingered like a dark cloud I couldn't shake. I tried to convince myself that time would heal the wounds, that each passing day would dull the pain, but the progress was agonizingly slow. I found myself withdrawing from friends and family. Invitations to dinners or gatherings went unanswered, and I stopped returning phone calls. It wasn't that I didn't appreciate their support, it was that being around them reminded me of the life I'd lost, the happiness I no longer felt. Work became my sanctuary, though even that felt like a shallow escape. I took on extra hours and immersed myself in projects, hoping to drown out the constant thoughts swirling in my mind. But no amount of spreadsheets or deadlines could erase the memories of what had happened. One evening, while scrolling aimlessly through social media, I came across a photo of Laura. She was out with a group of acquaintances, her smile bright and carefree, as if nothing had happened. Seeing her like that, as though she hadn't shattered our life together, sent a surge of anger coursing through me. I closed the app and threw my phone onto the couch. How could she move on so easily while I was stuck in the wreckage? In a rare moment of vulnerability, I confided in my closest friend, Matt. We were sitting in his backyard, the scent of barbecue lingering in the air, when he asked how I was holding up. I don't know, I admitted. I feel stuck. Like no matter what I do, I can't get past it. Matt nodded thoughtfully. You've been through hell, man. It's going to take time. But you can't let her control your future. You've got to find something, anything, that makes you feel alive again. His words stayed with me, though I wasn't sure where to start. I tried filling my weekends with activities, hikes, a few woodworking projects, even a cooking class, but nothing seemed to stick. Every new attempt felt like a band-aid on a wound too deep to heal. At night, the loneliness was unbearable. I'd sit in my small apartment, staring at the blank walls, feeling the weight of everything I'd lost. Sleep became elusive, my mind replaying old arguments, moments of betrayal, and the life I'd once thought was unshakable. I started questioning everything. Had I been too rigid, too focused on routine? Had I pushed Laura away without realizing it? Or was she always destined to find excitement elsewhere, no matter what I did? Those thoughts consumed me, making it impossible to look forward. The few times I tried to put myself back out there, through dating apps or casual introductions from friends, ended in disaster. I couldn't bring myself to trust anyone. Every smile, every compliment, felt insincere, like a prelude to another betrayal. Laura's name still came up occasionally, usually from mutual friends who hadn't realized how deeply I was trying to forget her. They'd mention her struggles, how she'd lost more clients, how her social circle had shrunk, but it didn't bring me any sense of vindication. If anything, it only deepened my sadness. We'd both lost so much, and for what? A fleeting thrill? A momentary escape? As the months dragged on, I realized that I wasn't just mourning the loss of my marriage, I was mourning the person I used to be. The man who believed in love, who trusted his partner implicitly, who thought he'd found his forever. That man was gone, and I didn't know how to bring him back. It's strange how life moves on, even when you feel like you're standing still. Months after the divorce, I find myself reflecting on everything that happened, not with the hope of making sense of it, but because the memories refuse to leave me. The betrayal, the lies, the collapse of the life I'd built with Laura, they've become a permanent part of me. No matter how much I try to push them aside, they linger in the background, shaping the way I see the world. I've come to accept that the man I was before is gone. The version of me who trusted without hesitation, who believed in the strength of love and commitment, has been replaced by someone more cautious, more guarded. I'm not proud of it, but it feels like a necessary evolution, a defense mechanism against the kind of pain I never want to experience again. Friends and family tell me I'll find happiness again, that this is just a phase, but their words ring hollow. The idea of letting someone into my life, of exposing myself to the risk of betrayal again, feels impossible. I've tried dipping my toes into the dating world, but every conversation, every smile, feels like a potential trap. Instead, I've thrown myself into work. My career has become my anchor, a place where I feel in control and valued. Numbers don't betray you. Deadlines don't break your heart. It's a safe, predictable refuge in a life that feels otherwise unrecognizable. As for Laura, I've heard bits and pieces about her life through mutual acquaintances. She's still struggling, financially, socially, emotionally. Derek disappeared from the picture not long after the divorce, and she's been trying to pick up the pieces ever since. There was a time when I would have taken solace in that, but now, I just feel numb. Her struggles don't undo the damage she caused, and they don't bring me any peace. We're both living with the consequences of her choices, but the weight feels heavier on my shoulders. Every once in a while, I'll stumble across an old photo or a memory will creep in uninvited, and I'll feel a pang of sadness for the life we had. There were good times, moments of laughter, love, and connection that now feel like they belong to someone else. But those moments weren't enough to save us. If there's a lesson in all of this, it's one I'm not ready to embrace. People talk about healing, about forgiveness, about the importance of moving on, but for now, those concepts feel distant. Maybe one day I'll get there. Maybe one day I'll find a way to trust again, to love again. But for now, I'm just surviving. One day at a time. The life I thought I'd have is gone, and I don't know what comes next. All I know is that the scars of betrayal run deep, and the journey to heal them feels like a road I'll be walking for a long, long time. Maybe I'll never find closure. Maybe that's the real lesson, that some wounds don't heal, and some parts of us remain broken no matter how much time passes. For now, I've resigned myself to this quieter, lonelier existence. It's not the life I wanted, but it's the life I have. And I'm doing my best to live with it.